Today, we zoom into the dire and tragic humanitarian situation in Gaza with Shaza Moghraby, a spokesperson for the World Food Programme in New York, to better understand how WFP, together with other international organizations, are grappling with food and water deliveries to address the impending famine in Gaza, which is home to 2.4 million Palestinians, the vast majority forcefully displaced by Israel's war in the Strip following the Hamas attacks of October 7th. Shaza, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for this opportunity.
So a UN-backed report back in March basically said that famine was imminent and likely imminent in May in the northern part of Gaza, and that it may quickly spread across the Strip amongst 2.4 million people by July. And there has been considerable pressure on Israel to ensure that humanitarian aid is delivered so that this impending famine is prevented. This week, the United Nations also noted that there is incremental progress being made on the ground. So I wonder if you can tell us how the World Food Programme assesses the situation on the ground today.
So thank you so much, Marissa, for having me. As you've said, we've had the IPC report, which is the gold standard for food security analysis and malnutrition analysis, come out in March, warning of human famine, particularly in the northern parts of Gaza, if the situation doesn't change and we don't get the access, WFP and the humanitarian actors and players do not get the access that they need to reach people, particularly in the north where the situation is most dire. Now, as you said, we have seen some modest improvements in recent days and recent weeks when it comes to access, particularly in the northern areas. Via the Ashdod port, there's been some temporary use of that port where we were able to deliver some wheat flour. We were able to use the Erez crossing, which was previously a passenger crossing, but now we were able to move some cargo, and also the new coordinated route, or also known as the fence road, to facilitate some trucks and convoys into the north. So improvements, but the key, in order for us to reverse the trajectory of moving towards famine, particularly in the northern areas, we need those routes to be open all the time. We need daily deliveries through those routes, not just weeks or every other day, but it has to be on a monthly basis. Only when we have that predictability, the sustainability, and our ability to diversify the kind of products that goes into markets, that's where we can start saying that we can be on the right track of halting famine and, as I said, reversing the trajectory.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what is happening on the ground in the northern part of Gaza, given that this is where the situation is most dire? Give us a sense of the numbers and how this assessment basically had predicted that this is where we will be by May.
So this assessment, let me first clarify, this is not a UN or a WFP assessment. This is a partner initiative. So we have 19 partners gathering the data and involved in the process of getting this data together and reach the results and the conclusions that it had on the 18th of March. And, as I said, the report warned of imminent famine in the northern parts of Gaza if there's no change in the status quo in terms of humanitarian access, but also the possibility of the southern areas, such as Rafah, to fall into famine in July if there is no tangible increase in terms of access. So what we're hearing from the ground, we've seen the images, the footage that are coming from Gaza on a daily basis, and really the reports and the results speak to that. We have the data, we have the evidence, we have people literally dialing up the world to tell them and show them what's going on. Parents documenting the starvation process of their children, the lack of availability in the food, the markets, there's nothing in the markets. So you could see, like my colleagues were telling me that whenever they go there, you could see the lifelessness in the eyes of people, parents watching their children wither away. And of course, you know, I think this is throughout the Strip. Children are not going to schools right now. There's not been any formal schooling. So you've got 6 months of missed education. So it's very catastrophic, horrific, and we really need to reverse this track and reach as many people as possible. A few days ago, I think last week, we were able to, with this new improved access, we were able to open 4 bakeries in the north. So for the first time, people in the northern areas who were, you know, using extreme measures to make bread, animal feed and bird seed to make bread, for the first time, they are tasting fresh bread in 6 months. And the psychological impact of that on the people, my colleagues were telling me, people were cheering, they were clapping, they were elated for something so simple and basic. So we hope that this is going to be consistent. The people of Gaza have gone through enough, and it's important that we have that access and also have our people access those areas. You're talking about a starvation crisis that's been going on for months, so it's important that we have the right nutrition and the right kind of food and monitoring to provide the appropriate kind of diet and nutrition. Otherwise, for many people with chronic conditions, this could be fatal if you just give them any kind of food.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's and that's a huge part of what WFP does, of course. I mean, you noted that in order to ensure that we don't get to this impending famine that the report warned of, that there has to be access to food on a daily basis, that this has to be sustainable, and that is key to reversing that trend. Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, had noted many times that this is a man-made famine, a man-made humanitarian disaster. Others in the EU have also pointed fingers at Israel more directly, saying that it is weaponizing food. So on the ground, there is a security challenge in terms of how to get access, and everything is closed in the name of security. What are some of the key challenges that WFP staff on the ground, as well as other partner organizations you work with, have documented or reported on as sort of some of the key challenges that they face on the ground?
I mean, there's a variety of challenges. And as you said, security is a big issue. Our staff who have endured the same conditions as many people in Gaza, they've been displaced once and twice, and are currently mainly operating in Rafah, do not feel safe distributing aid. Things have slightly improved, but still there's always this risk and the threat. And they have to, you know, be on the spot, creative and innovative in finding distribution points where they can safely distribute. The people that are entitled to the assistance do not feel safe receiving that assistance. And according to international humanitarian law, protection of civilians is paramount. Civilians should be able to access our distribution points safely to receive the aid that we are providing them. You know, we've been hearing that people have been queuing, you know, in lines for breads, many of whom are children, who are scared and anxious if a bomb is going to fall on them while they are accessing our food. But we have been working on deconflicting some of the areas. We've seen some improvements. Wherever there's regularity of assistance and trucks and convoys coming in, there is a higher sense and level of calm. But at some point when people see a truck, and this would be the first truck or trucks that they've seen in months, and they don't know when the next one is going to be, this is where many of them risk their lives to approach the trucks and help them themselves. Anyone would do it, you would do it, I would do it, particularly if they have children who are suffering from starvation, and death by starvation is excruciatingly painful. So it's heartbreaking to see these images. And we are hoping that whatever improvements we've seen, they're modest at this stage, but whatever improvements we have seen, that they continue. I think enough is enough. There's immense suffering, and it's time for us to start to start putting ourselves on the road of recovery.
And then lastly, in terms of some of the key steps that WFP is advocating for in the international arena to ensure that Palestinians in Gaza are not basically continuously at risk of starvation. What are some of the key steps, if you were to sort of sum them up in terms of some of the key steps that you and your colleagues have been calling on?
We've been advocating continuously for the past few months. First of all, to open as many border crossings into Gaza and entry points within the Strip, so that we are able to reach as many people throughout the strips, whoever is hungry, wherever they are. There's been achievements in this in the past few weeks. We continue to advocate that this is sustainable, us along with the UN system, that we cannot do this alone. So we will continue to do that. And of course, we will continue to speak to all stakeholders who has an influence to make sure that this is going to be a long-term recovery. We need to have the right steps. We cannot afford any setbacks to whatever progress that we will make in the next couple of months. And on this, we're hearing reports about an impending military incursion in Rafah, and I cannot begin to tell you how devastating this would be on a traumatized population that is squeezed. 70% of the entire population is taking shelter in Rafah in makeshift tents, and are squeezed into 20% of the Strip. So, the impact this will have, the psychological impact they will have, is just going to be devastating, because they only left their homes with nothing but the clothes on their back. For us, Rafah has been the main entry for assistance through Gaza. So we've been investing months in setting up the right infrastructures for our aid operations. If there's going to be a mass displacement somewhere else, this means that we need to build an operations from the ground up somewhere else. And the vast majority of the areas in Gaza, as we've seen, is decimated. The health system has been obliterated. So, while instead of the focus being to halt famine and reverse the trajectory of famine, it's going to be focused on building an operation. And we are committed to stay and deliver, but there is a high probability that our life-saving operation might come to a standstill if there is an incursion.
Thank you for shedding light on this, because this is, of course, in the headlines, given the reports that we've seen coming out of Israel, but also how the Biden administration, in its conversations with Israeli officials, has been very clear that the protection of civilians should be not only considered, but should be at the top of the agenda. Shaza Moghraby, thank you so much once again for your time today and for shedding light on the view from the World Food Programme. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.